very high 100-ton containment dome will soon be lowered over the largest of the 3 Gulf oil spills, Dick Cheney's Katrina. Chances of success unknown. In our third story tonight, what metaphorical containment dome can possibly stem the tide of political hypocrisy ebbing from the governor of Louisiana. This particular attempt to stop the underwater gushing well has never been tried before. We're now talking about the actual thing and not the governor. But the 100-ton concrete and steel box was moved into position today to be lowered a mile under the surface of the Gulf of Mexico. An executive from BP says the containment structure will be placed over the leak site late this evening. The goal is to cover the largest of the 3 leaks, the dome-like top of the containment box acting like a funnel to siphon the oil up to a tanker at the surface. If it's successful, the system could collect as much as 85% of the 210,000 gallons of oil spewing from the blown-out well. But no matter what, the immediate damage from the oil rig explosion, as well as the ripple effect on the local economy, is not nearly close to final score. And oil has now reached an island formation off the Louisiana coast, the Chandeleur Islands. The governor of Louisiana, Bobby Jindal, visited Grand Isle this morning to assess the needs of local officials there. The Republican governor has so far asked for federal aid several times in relation to this spill, including a request for federal funds should BP fall short of meeting the needs of our people, a request for federal employment benefits funding to help pay for disaster-related workforce training and job placement services and unemployment benefit services for workers displaced as a result of the oil spill, a request to the Small Business Administration to approve more loans for local business owners, a request to the Department of Commerce for a declaration of a commercial fisheries failure so that more government assistance may flow. The governor saying, quote, "I want to reiterate again, this spill fundamentally threatens our way of life in Louisiana." This is the same governor who decried the stimulus package, which was meant to help lessen the most painful aspects of the worst recession since the Great Depression. It is the same governor who mocked stimulus money for the monitoring of volcanoes that could create crises of near or equal proportions in other states. Of course, Jindal posed with stimulus checks that reached local communities in his state, despite his rhetorical protestations. Whether Congress will consider special funding on top of BP's liability, recently addressed by Senator Bob Menendez of New Jersey. Quoting him, "Well, you know, here we go. You know, the governor of Louisiana says the federal government should stay out of the state's business." Let's bring in the founder and publisher of Daily Kos, Markos Moulitsas. Markos, good evening.
Good evening, Keith.
The Great Recession destroyed the economy of essentially every state in the Union. Governor Jindal fretted about government aid, especially for, you know, the monitoring of the would warn of things, of disasters like volcanoes. The big spill threatens to wreck the economy of his state, and all of a sudden he is all over every way he can find to ask for government aid. Do I have it about right?
It sounds about right. Yeah, no, I mean, it's not even about Louisiana. I mean, there are a lot of people in Louisiana that could obviously benefit from that stimulus funding, but Bobby Jindal thought that it would be a good, easy way to score points against Obama and position himself for his 2012 presidential run. Suddenly, though, I think that people that that he knows that are directly related to him, and he himself are being directly impacted by this disaster, not just politically, but I think personally. And while they may think, well, people who get stimulus funding, they're not going to vote Republican. I don't care about those people. I'd rather score political points off them. In this case, it's about him. And suddenly, since it's about him, he cares. I just wish that he would have that kind of empathy for the rest of not just Louisiana, but the rest of America that has also suffered because of cataclysmic economic collapse.
The argument that people in this situation always try to make to sort of retrofit over their blinkered view of just their own, what's right in front of them. Well, the money's going to go out. It already exists. We would be derelict not to ask for that government aid. But in the case of the Gulf, Congress hasn't allocated the funds yet that would exceed the BP liability, and there is more interest now in raising that BP liability limit past the current cap of $75 million, if there's some way to do that. So is it Jindal is essentially asking for special government aid above what another state would get in this situation, is he not?
Yeah, he's essentially asking for a bailout of his state. I mean, he's realizing that the state now faces a cataclysmic disaster. They cannot pay for it. They cannot handle it. And the federal government exists for a reason. There's a reason that people like me and you have always advocated for the role of the federal government in helping those in need. And I think Bobby Jindal is starting to realize that the mighty state rights crowd doesn't have the answers when they're actually hit by real crisis. They now need the federal federal government. And again, I wish that they would have this kind of empathy for the rest of the country, because there are times that it's right for the federal government to come in and lend a hand, because only the federal government has the resources to make that happen.
Well, with all of this convenient on and off of Governor Jindal's recognition of that, nonetheless, is the main political thread when this story is resolved separate and above the damage and the effect on people's lives. But the political end of this, is the main part of that story going to be, guess what, another big company screwed us and the government sort of enabled this?
Well, that's definitely part of it. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And I think we cannot forget the fact that the Bush administration did help enable this. Politicians in Louisiana helped enable this. I mean, this is sort of the whole political establishment in Louisiana is bought and paid for by the energy industry. Democrats, Republicans alike, to the point where many of them are still calling for expanded drilling offshore. They're not learning from this tragedy and from the disaster. So clearly, this is it would be in a rational world a lesson to be learned, and it would sort of spur lawmakers to focus more on renewable sorts of energy that are clean and are green. But you know, D.C. works differently. They march to a different drummer.
Drill, baby, drill. Marcos Melitsas of Daily Kos. Always a pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.